Social media isn't social anymore, and we know this because you can see on Google Trends that people are searching how to deactivate Facebook and Instagram, which happens to be amongst the top social media platforms as at now owned by Meta. This points to a rising negative sentiment when it comes to social media use, and in this episode, we will explore the value of social media platforms and who it benefits. Is it the users? Is it creators? Is it businesses? Or is it these platforms themselves? I've actually read research papers on this with all their painful jargon, and I'll be sharing their findings, which will help you to have a healthy overview so that you can make useful decisions on how you navigate these platforms. I am Jepkoech Kenagor, your resident marketing strategist, also a creator and producer. When the idea for this episode came to mind, my working theory was that social media isn't social anymore because it's just media. But when I started reading one of the research papers, a different perspective came to mind, and I'm going to explain that later on in the episode. But it's also very true that it's just media right now because we've gone back to the premise of traditional media. When these social media platforms first came, they were offering something different. They were giving you an opportunity to connect with people from different parts of the world, to share your day-to-day with your friends. But right now we're at a point where there's really not much difference between the social media that we have right now and the traditional media platforms like the TV and radio, because now these algorithms are feeding you content. They're feeding you all these kinds of videos. You're not the one that is making the choice, and then a lot of it is just laced with a lot of ads. It's like getting a gift that has a really beautiful wrapping paper, but when you open inside, it's just something that is absolutely bad for you. That's what social media has become. And even when you look at influencers and creators right now, they're not just posting their day-to-day because they want to share with people. They're not oversharing like the people of the past. Nowadays, people are coming in with strategy because they know they're creating content with the end goal of getting brand sponsorships, of creating a business, of building a community so that they can also monetize that community. And it's actually so interesting that this was predicted, although not in the exact terms, but when you read the research paper, The Future of Social Media Marketing, which was written in 2019, they divide the future of social media into 3: immediate future, near future, and far future. And what I find so interesting is that we've already gotten to the far future, and this was in 2019 when they were writing this, and it is 2025. How many years later? Only 8 years later, and we're already in the far future that they were talking about. So for the immediate future, they talked about how individuals would be omnisocial, and this means that a lot of people would integrate social media into their lives. This happened a long time ago. Things like travel, things like finding inspiration, through Pinterest and all that. And in the immediate future, they also said there would be a rise of influencers. We've already seen that. And one of the key public policy concerns that people would have is privacy. We are already past that. That has been happening for quite some time now. Then when you come to the near future, we wrote about how a lot of individuals would be combating loneliness and isolation. That is something that has come to pass. Also mentioned social media becoming a political tool. That has already happened. So we've already gone past the immediate future and the near future. When it comes to the far future, they mentioned that there would be increased sensory richness, and I believe this is where we're actually getting to find ourselves. This is actually what we're starting to see, because right now in the social media platforms, there's just a lot of content, and in order for you to really stand out, you need to give something more. So getting to a point where we'll get technology that will help people to smell something that they see on social media. Maybe it's food that someone is cooking and you can smell it, something like that. We're almost getting there. There's also offline and online integration and complete convergence. Things like augmented reality. We're already starting to see the first steps of that with the glasses, the VR glasses and all that. And one of the key public policy concerns would be social media by non-humans. This is also something that we've been seeing. I mean, a lot of people are using AI to create content. We're seeing a rise in AI influencers. And one of the most concerning things I've seen on TikToks is that there are people who are creating accounts where the talking head is AI, but the content that talking head is saying something that has been completely stolen from a real human creator on TikTok. That is something that is not only scary, but it also makes you think about what's going to happen to social media. That is actually very scary, because as a creator myself, I'm like, I am taking my time to actually create my own content like this episode. I've used my own time to read the research papers, to even write the script, to sit down and form this, and someone is just going to copy everything that you're saying and feed it into AI and create an AI video. that doesn't make any sense. And I know, of course, I could use AI to read my research papers. I could use AI to write my script, but for me, that doesn't make any sense. I think this is something that we can talk about later, but I deeply believe that as much as AI can do a lot of those things, once you let AI do a lot of these things that you can also do, it removes meaning from a lot of your own work. And when meaning is lost from your own work, then you're going to start feeling as if you're useless. And if you start feeling like that, you start feeling like life is not worth it anymore. That is the perfect recipe for depression and for going into psychosis. But of course, that is an entire different conversation. But it's very clear that we are already at the far future that this research paper was actually talking about. But that still does not resolve the problem that we have, the fact that the platforms that you sign up to are not the same ones that they end up being in a few years, because they totally lose their value propositions, because they start prioritizing their greed for money. And that's exactly what has been happening. And this is one of the things that's highlighted by a research paper that was actually published in July 2025, the causes of declining user engagement on social media platforms and management countermeasures. It is very true that the social media today is not what they promised it to be 10 years ago. Actually, right now, they've literally just advertising platforms. And when it comes to this topic, it's so interesting in particular because when you look at social media platforms, you have different stakeholders that are actually depending on these platforms. It's not just creators, it's not just users. You also have these other businesses who also want to have access to users so that they can serve them advertisements. And I can understand how difficult it can be to make everyone happy, but if we're really being honest, the platforms of today have just become too much. They're just really cannibalistic because they want to take everything for themselves. They want to overfeed the users with content, because the more content they're going to serve you, then the more money they're going to make, because they can serve you more ads. And this is also one of the reasons why a lot of people are just getting tired with the social media platforms. And this is what in the research paper they call algorithmic fatigue and information overload. But you see, this is how these platforms make money. They want you to be as tired as possible, so they're overloading you with a lot of content, and it's just a lot of short form content. And then you just get to a point where you're just doom scrolling because you have no purpose for what you're doing. You're bored. But you're also addicted, because it's really addictive. These interfaces that they create are really addictive, and it's actually hard to break out of it. If you've tried to stay out of TikTok or Instagram, you would know how difficult it actually is. Just try going 2 hours, 3 hours without touching your phone. It's something that a lot of people struggle with, because the way they create these interfaces are meant to be very addictive. And we're also seeing a rise in negative content being constantly pushed out, and actually this is because a lot of people always react to negative content, because psychologically we have this thing called negativity bias, and you always pay more attention to something that is negative. It makes you react more. And these platforms, they really want content that engages with a lot of people. That tends to be hateful content or more negative content. But you can imagine, the more you feed people a lot of this negative content, the more negative people become even in their own lives. That's not really helpful for society in the long term, is it? There's also a lot of concerns on data security, privacy. But, a lot of these platforms could argue that they're monetizing your data, and they need your data because they're providing you with these platforms, this software, for free. So it's a good exchange if you ask them. But I think it's interesting to ask these platforms to really care about people's data, because one of their priorities is to have access to all kinds of data that they can have on you as an individual person, because they need to sell that data to advertisers so that they can do their personalized targeting, so that they can target the perfect persona that is going to be perfect for their product. And in this research paper, they give managerial countermeasures that would help with this declining user engagement, because at the end of the day, for these platforms to make money, they need to have a lot of users. But if the experience that a lot of users have on these platforms are not good and they decide to leave, then that is not going to be very good for these platforms, isn't it? But what I find really interesting with these managerial countermeasures is that yes, they are good on paper, but they're actually not going to work. Because if these platforms decide to put these measures into place, it means that they're going to cut their revenue. One of the things they mentioned is about strengthening privacy protection and ensuring that users have control over their own data. That is something that is not going to be beneficial for these platforms, because they need to have access to your data so that they can sell it to advertisers for personalized advertising. The other countermeasure is to improve content quality by giving control of their own algorithms. That would be good for the users because it's going to help a lot of users with their mental health. But at the end of the day, this is not going to be very beneficial for these platforms, because if someone is going to choose what they want to watch and they're actually paying a lot of attention on what they're choosing, it means they're not going to be mindlessly scrolling. And that's not really good for just feeding people whatever kind of content that is going to make them agitated, that is going to make them angry, that will force them to react, to even leave comments, to even start talking to other people and going into other people's DMs and threatening them. These algorithms that feed people content will always push people into these extreme behaviors, and that is actually very beneficial because they will stay longer on the platform and they can be fed more ads. But when someone is in control of their own algorithm, it's not easy to manipulate them, and that's not something that's beneficial for those cannibalistic platforms. Another managerial countermeasure is to optimize for community. And at first, a lot of these platforms really cared about helping people create communities, to organize if they want to. But a lot of these platforms have become really big businesses that have ties with politics. And if you know one thing about politics, is that politicians, they hate it when the people can come together and discuss things. They hate community, they hate organizing. And what I've seen over time with these social media platforms is that they're increasing censorship on topics that they do not like, and a lot of these topics tend to be political topics. And so yes, optimizing these platforms for community would be great for a lot of users, because it means that a lot of people are going to stop being lonely and we're going to go back to the initial value proposition of these platforms. But that also means that on a business side, these platforms are not going to carry favor with politicians, with the governments that are in place. And if you're not on the good sides of politics, my goodness, you're not going to be in business. And even as a creator, I mean, these thoughts of leaving social media platforms, and one of the reasons why is that I always notice there's a disproportionate harassment of women online. According to studies, this is something that has been found to be very true. Studies show that about 16 to 58% of women and girls have been targeted by violence online. And you know, the thing is, this online violence does not just end at online, it crosses to offline. And this becomes different forms of violence like rape, assault, and femicide. And unfortunately, this is something that a lot of these platforms are not interested in solving. It's really sad that we've gotten to a point where being harassed, getting death threats, it's something that is considered normal, especially for a lot of female creators. And you know, you'll get a death threat just because someone didn't like your hair, or just because someone decided that, oh, a woman wearing a red lipstick is something that is so bad, so you should die for doing that. It's so interesting that someone can write that in a comment and they are not going to be blocked as a user, and in fact when you report them, the platform will tell you they find nothing wrong. But when someone speaks out about the injustices that are going politically in their own country, their entire account can actually be taken off the platform. I just find this to be absolutely preposterous, but unfortunately this is the reality, and it's not the reality for everyone, but it's the reality for some people. Personally, I also care about the fact that I do not want to lose my critical thinking skills, and I do not want to waste a lot of my time just scrolling on social media, because time is really precious and it's not infinite, and I want to use it to be as productive as much as possible, productive in a way that actually serves me, in a way that helps me to grow. And that's why I prefer to make this podcast episodes, because it's much better for me to be reading a research paper, thinking about an idea. I'd rather invest my time into exploring that than just going on social media and just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, because what's the point? And just being fed ads and making somebody else rich because I do not know how to use my time. And then as a creator, I've been having several thoughts, especially about creating on these social media platforms, and I'm really starting to think that a lot not more creators should be selfish, because what we're finding right now is that these platforms are actually depending on creators. They want you to create content that is going to inform, educate, and entertain users. Then they're using your content as a magnet to serve ads. But what we're seeing is that these platforms do not want to give you your fair share for the work that you're doing in capturing the eyeballs of the users that they need. They'll tell you that we're giving you a platform so that you can build a community. But what we've been seeing over the years is that the algorithm keeps on changing. Like Instagram, it used to be photos, then they told people start creating videos, and the videos need to be short as 5 seconds. Then they also say they want longer videos. Then they also say carousels, but not just carousels of you just posting whatever you want. It has to be a picture story. They just keep on moving the goalpost over and over. And this means that you as a creator will keep getting screwed over and over, because you'll put a lot of energy, invest in something, and then the platform is like, oh, we do not care about that anymore. You should do this instead. And once you've invested in that, they change too. It's like you are in a ship that literally has no direction. What's the point? It's also a fact that a lot of these platforms, short form platforms in particular, do not really care about creators at this point. They only care about the businesses that are paying for advertising. And even one of the things that I keep on saying on some of my old videos on TikTok and Instagram is that when you post, they're literally telling you boost this to get to a bigger audience. They want you to pay so that you can get to a larger audience. Are you going to be paying each and every time you're posting? On top of that, for a platform like Instagram, they want you to pay for a blue tick monthly. At this point, you're asking yourself, if you're a creator who just wants to build community so that you can get brand sponsorships, does it really make sense for you to be building on social media platforms if you do not have a product that you're selling yourself? Does it really make sense? Put in mind that these platforms also deliberately tank paid ads. Yes, the brand sponsorships that you've been paid to do. I have noticed a trend where you will go to someone's page where they consistently get about 50,000 views on their content, but when they have a paid partnership label, all of a sudden it's just at 5,000 views. And I'm like, no, this doesn't make sense. I know that there are so many people nowadays who do not want to watch ads, but there's also a fact that a lot of these platforms do not want to actually push your paid ad videos because they want you to pay to boost, because they know at the end of the day you're very desperate to get that engagement so that you can show that you have good engagement to the people who are paying you for that sponsored video. One of the key things about how they keep on changing the algorithm is that many times a lot of creators are forced to create content in a way that they do not like, just so that they can be on the good side of the algorithm. And in a long-term point of view, that is not sustainable, because you're forcing yourself to literally become a slave to the algorithm. And that means you really have no time or energy to even invest in your own ideas, because you really just focused on what is trending, how can I get on the algorithm, how can I get visibility this week. But of course, this can be beneficial if you're a business or if you're a creator that has a very clear end goal of maybe selling a product. You can play the game for a little while, get whatever you want and leave, go somewhere else. Or you can play the game, get the group of people who are interested in what you're doing, and then you move them somewhere else. And this is why I deeply believe that social media is not social anymore. It's just media. But while I was reading this paper, something caught my eye that's called haptic technology. And this is technology that stimulates physical touch, like vibrations. It can make you feel virtual objects, like if someone is pouring water on their hand on screen, it's like you can feel it, even though you're not pouring water on yourself. I think that's pretty cool. I actually believe that this is going to be a huge game changer, especially for advertisers, and it's going to create something called intrapersonal media. And now that we're in a point where we're trying to integrate offline and online to have that complete convergence, this is going to create an opportunity for a lot of advertisers to send signals to an individual so that they can have a conversation with themselves about a product. Right now, what social media has been doing for a lot of businesses is having that word of mouth where people are sharing what they think about a product. But think about when you're able to interact with a product through an ad, and because of the experience that you're having, because you can feel certain sensations, this is sending signals to your own head about how you feel about this product. That is intrapersonal media, because now you're having a conversation with yourself about this thing, And without even asking somebody else about their opinion of what they think, you might end up buying it just because of those sensations that you had and how they were able to convince you to buy that thing. I think that is something that is going to be a huge game changer for advertising. So we're going to have media, just media, being fed content like the TVs and radios did, but you're also having that intrapersonal media where you're literally having a conversation with yourself about things. You've created this entire bubble and you're living in your own world. Even though you're also on a platform where you could connect with different kinds of people, but you're just living in your own world. But I believe when you look at some of the behaviors of a lot of users right now, that is where we're headed. As I mentioned in the last episode, this individualism that a lot of people have, where they want each piece of content to be speaking to them, to be highlighting the experiences that they have. A lot of creators are suffering right now because each and every time you post something and someone does not relate with it, they're like, why did you say that? That's wrong. Why don't you know what happened in my own life? We're already seeing this whataboutism, this loneliness that a lot of people have, and they want their own stories constantly reflected to them. This is going to be a huge opportunity. But this also means that for this kind of content, you need to give up your privacy, because how is someone going to tailor your own stories and reflect them back to you and feed them back to you if they do not know everything about you? We are about to get into the age of absolute narcissism, and I don't know how it's going to be, but I know for a fact that a lot of businesses are going to milk a lot of money from it because they can use your own narcissism to sell your products. They make money out of it. Another key factor that is going to affect a lot of creators is also AI content, AI slop, AI users. These platforms are going to lose their meaning for a lot of creators, because if you have a lot of this AI stuff competing with the real human beings, and this AI stuff is actually copying what the human beings are doing, but the human beings are not getting the credit, and it's the people that are using all this AI that are taking everything, including the money and visibility. Is it really going to make any sense? We do not have any kind of regulations on this. A lot of users do not even know how to differentiate between real human beings and AI, because AI has gotten to such an advanced level. At the end of the day, the real losers of this social media not becoming social media anymore, I think, are creators. Yet they're the ones that actually capture the eyeballs of the users so that these platforms can feed ads to these eyeballs. You're not getting anything, not community, not money, but the platforms are depending on you to provide free content so that they can make money from the users who are depending on your content to be informed, to be educated, to be entertained. At the end of the day, it just shows that social media platforms have just become advertising platforms. It really makes you wonder, as a user, what are you going to do on an advertising platform? It's like serving yourself up on a platter to be eaten by others. Because you're not getting anything. Your data is being taken away and it's being sold to the highest bidder so that that highest bidder can sell products to you. And I will just leave you with a question. Are you satisfied with your own use of social media platforms, whether it's as a user, as a creator, or even as a business?